Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name is SockBot, and today I want to talk a little bit about controls within Dreams, specifically because this was a very contentious topic, I guess we could call it, when Dreams was first released in beta, and then especially in early access, all over the forums. So if you're interested in that sort of discussion, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how my opinion of the controls has changed over time, whether or not I consider them good today, and also some tips for anybody that is just starting to learn or somebody that has maybe spent a lot of time within Dreams and is just still struggling with all of that. And of course, I will also be talking about both forms of controls, the move control and the DualShock for Dreams as a creator and from a creator perspective, because that's most of what we do on this channel. But if you do enjoy this sort of discussion and or slash tips video, feel free to leave a like down below and feel free to subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. Talk a lot about Dreams and Little Big Planet here, so yeah, feel free to stick around if you want to, but no pressure as always. So first, what I want to talk about is basically, did it get easier? So if you'll remember my opinion from the initial impressions of the Dreams beta and then the impressions of the early access once it was like actually out and I had actually spent more than just a week with it because that's what beta was like, I was a little bit nervous, but mostly kind of positive thinking about what the controls were like at the time. I saw a lot of the complaints on the forums and actually on YouTube here with the few people that were actually posting about Dreams at the time that it was very difficult. People didn't like the move controls. They thought that, specifically the motion controls, not the PlayStation move controls. A lot of people thought that the PlayStation move was absolutely necessary for the game. And at the time I was like, just hold off, play with it for a little bit. You'll get used to it eventually, just like we did all the other controls. And that's kind of what my opinion has stayed. I have spent a lot of time with the game, and not close to as much as a lot of other creators have, because, you know, I do gameplay, but then the other half of my time spent around Dreams is making videos about it. So I have spent a decent amount of time with the game, given that it's been about, what is that, 7 months since April? 7 months? Yeah, it's November. So I have spent a good amount of time with it, but not a crazy amount of time with it. I think I'm only level 20-something in it, and of course, my basic thing is art and design, because all I do is really create and then stream when I look at other people's creations, but I have not spent a crazy amount of time with it is the point that I'm trying to make here, and I have very much gotten used to it. I think now that the motion controls give you so much freedom, and yes, they can be a little bit finicky if you're trying to do super minute details, but there's always a workaround for that, and that's what I'll talk a little bit more about in the tips section. But yes, in general, it has gotten much better, largely because I've been able to practice with it. So next I want to talk about the move controls. If you see me looking down, I have like notes here to make sure I don't miss anything, but I do want to talk about the move controllers because initially, like I said, a lot of people were thinking they were absolutely necessary, or a lot of people were thinking more so that they were angry that they couldn't fully experience Dreams without them in the sense of the create mode. And here I am to tell you that that is absolutely not true. Now, initially, this was kind of my impression with my initial impressions was that both of them are different control schemes, both of them have their own difficulty curve to learning, the move controllers being a little bit higher, but also having a little bit more potential in certain things, and I stick by that. But I think the more that I've learned what most people will be doing in terms of create mode, most people will not need the move controllers. But I'm going to talk about who will need them and who will not need them, because, of course, most people might not be you. You might not be most people. In fact, you're not most people, but in this case, you might be most people. So, yes, the people that really will need the move controllers are people that intend on using Dreams as like a sculpting 3D program, as opposed to as a game creation tool. So if you're going to be creating a ridiculous amount of very complicated and unique assets, especially creatures and faces and anything of that matter, I would recommend the move controllers. Even just one of them, you really don't need two. Two is more, just gives you kind of quicker, zappier creation, but it's really not necessary, because for the one, you're basically just using it for that perfect rotation, and so you can very minutely carve into your sculpture. But I really really, really want to stress that it is not necessary for most people, even people that are sculpting. For example, some of the clips that you have seen during this video are of me creating a level called Creep, which I'm working on right now, and I have created all of the terrain assets, and mind, they're not crazy fancy or anything like that, but even like the tentacles coming off of the creepy rotating and floating platforms, I created all of that with the DualShock. I didn't use the move for any of this, and though I was tempted for certain things, it's for other parts of the level that I haven't put in yet. I may still pick them up for later in the level if I do want to have very specific sculptures, but again, I don't need it, and I don't find myself reaching for it 90% of the time, because unless you're sculpting these things, it's kind of a hindrance to have them. It makes it a little bit more difficult if you're just trying to move things around within the grander space of a level or within a game. And especially when it comes to creating technology and working with the logic of your level, they can be a hindrance. I'm not saying that nobody is going to need them. Obviously, if you do want to be a really fancy creator and make all of your assets from scratch, which if you are going to do that, well, first of all, go watch some other videos of mine and make sure you don't, because you don't need to. There's a lot of unused amazing assets on the store that are on the online services, but regardless, if you do really want to make those minute details, by all means, go out and buy one, buy two. You can find them on eBay for like $90 for two of them. I think I got mine for 70, but that was before Dreams came out, and I'm assuming nobody used them until this for the last few years. But feel free to do that. They do give some benefits. Specifically, the triggers on the back are incredibly sensitive, which is fantastic for Dreams and fantastic for making very, very tiny changes. But again, I think for 99% of people, maybe 95% of creators within Dreams, which isn't even the entire player base of Dreams, you don't need it. But all in all, I think the DualShock controls are fantastic. I think that the ability to very quickly put a level together from assets that you've created, or very quickly create a few assets to then put that level together, is accentuated by the controls. And being able to move things very, very minutely by just barely touching the R2 button, or barely touching the L2 button if you're trying to rotate things, works fantastically. And learning that along with the different snaps and the different, like the grid snap and all of the different, what are they called? Guides, that's what I was working about, not the grid snap. We'll talk about that in a second, but learning all of those along with the motion controls and just getting used to using a DualShock and recentering the imp every so often, it really does work well. Now, there's still some issues with it, specifically drift when you do have to recenter your imp a lot, and it does get slightly annoying, but I mean, that's kind of the case with every sort of motion control. I'm sure that it could be worked on, but I have not found a huge issue with it, and it is absolutely true that the benefits outweigh all of the difficulties. In fact, I am able to create certain things much, much quicker within this game as compared to Little Big Planet, which I never thought was going to be the case. I mean, if you've watched one of my recent videos, I do miss certain things about Little Big Planet in terms of being able to throw things together really quickly, but again, that is based on very different parts of creation that I'm talking about now. There definitely are some things that are faster within Dreams. If you want to see an entire video about this, because I think I'm going to do one anyways, because there's so many things that are faster within Dreams, and there's still things that are faster in Little Big Planet, don't get me wrong, but there are things that are faster in Dreams, and that surprised me, so I will be talking about that in the near future, but let me know if you want to see that video. So if we're going to get into tips from that move controller section, I'm going to talk mainly about DualShock users, and for a lot of my videos you'll know that this is kind of my assumption, is that whoever is watching them does not even own the move controllers, so if you do want an entire video of tips on the move controllers, feel free to let me know, but the majority of people, including myself for the majority of my time, are probably using DualShock controllers, so that's what we're going to talk about. But some of these tips do apply universally, so take that as you will. So the first tip that I have, and this is for pretty much everybody that is making any sort of platformer, or really any kind of structure in general that uses multiple sculpts, even if they are majority from the online services and other creators, definitely use upright mode. Now, this is probably my most used feature within the entire thing, more than precision mode, which I will talk about in a second, but using upright mode stops all of your creations from rotating and flipping all over the place, which was a huge problem I had at the beginning, and I know that a lot of people still have issues with that. It is very annoying when you're trying to just place platforms between two different sections, or just place rocks on a giant structure when you're trying to build a mountain, and they're constantly rotating and changing in ways that you don't want them. So my best suggestion is to use upright mode and place things where you want them to go, and then you can turn it off and rotate them how you want afterwards. And once you get used to this sort of, a step-by-step process, it goes very quickly, and for the most part you'll find that with your sculpts you don't really need to rotate them a whole lot. Now, if you are trying to use sculpts to build a larger mountain, this is one of the places where the move controllers might come into play outside of sculpts, but again, it's really not necessary, and in most cases it's not going to be any faster anyways. Now, in addition to this, this is something that I, for some reason, just completely missed, and I learned it, and I talked about it in a previous video, but I want to mention it here. But using this upright mode along with the rotate button, which is L2, and that is to say, hover over an object that you've already placed, hold L2, and then move your controller to rotate it, just like you do with the move controllers. That is incredibly useful, and it is one of the reasons why I don't use the move controllers very much now that I found this function, because it's just so easy to do. And this, again, stops you from having to focus on too many things and having to contort yourself into weird positions with the controllers to get your object in the right place and get your object in the right orientation in the case of rotating it. Now, this does work if you turn off the upright mode. It does actually let you rotate it upside down and all of those sorts of things, but I don't really find that necessary. I find the combination of them is very helpful, at least for my purposes. Now, on top of this is precision mode. I've talked about this before, but I want to mention specifically what I use it for probably 90% of the time now. Precision mode is fantastic for moving things very minutely because it does drastically decrease the sensitivity of your motion controls, and you can then further decrease that sensitivity by just very slightly holding R2 and then just barely moving things if that's what you're trying to do with your fine-tuning, but more so, it is incredibly useful for moving things in only one direction. Cue all of the old One Direction memes, but it is great for moving things if you just want to move them in the X direction, the Y direction, or the Z direction, which is very useful if you just want to raise the platform a little bit or lower it just a little bit. I can also find it somewhat useful for creating technology that's on the same plane and trying to just create your own circuit board if you want, but of course you could just use a circuit board for that. It's just a small thing that it came into use recently. But yes, very useful for moving in one direction, and again, all of these sorts of minute tips will help you with the issue of the controls, which is that your limbs are not always the most accurate things. Especially me, I tremor a little bit, it's not from anything, it just kind of runs in my family, which can make it incredibly difficult to make those minute movements. But that's why all of these different things that allow you to move just one part of an object, or turn just one part of an object, or just shift it very, very slightly are incredibly useful. Because Dreams is fantastic for spewing out a huge level with a bunch of different pieces, but making that level actually work well and look a little bit better than just a bunch of hodgepodge pieces put together, you're going to need to fine-tune things. And this is part of an aspect that's not really there in Little Big Planet, but again, I'll talk about those comparisons in a future video. Again, let me know if you want to see that. But above all, and I know this is going to piss people off, I think the biggest thing I can suggest is that you practice. One of the things I talk about a lot in videos that it's kind of a meme with me at this point. I don't enjoy remakes because I think that people are wasting their time for the most part. Because you really could be getting all the credit for all of those remakes. Like, if you just changed things slightly and tuned it a little bit differently, it could be entirely yours and you could get all the credit that you deserve, because I know you work really hard on those remakes, but I have a whole video on that, and if you want to watch that, so feel free to go watch that. But what I want to say here, and this is the only time I'll ever say this, if you are just starting, remake a level or remake a game. It's a lot easier to learn the tools when you don't have to plan out an entire area, and it can be very helpful with teaching you how to create a 3D area, especially if you're coming from Little Big Planet. I did it, and I know a lot of other creators did, and I know a lot of them spent way too much time on it, and so I'm not recommending you go out there and recreate the entirety of Super Mario 64. Well, actually, specifically that, I am telling you to do that because I love that game and I would love to see it recreated within Dreams. Obviously, the Mario character is one of the most popular online, but Aside from that, yeah, feel free to recreate that. But outside of that, don't waste your time. But anyways, that was my list of tips and also my evolved opinions on the controls within Dreams. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have similar opinions, or specifically, as I assume a lot of you do, if you have very different opinions, feel free to leave them in the comments down below. This is just my experience and my tips alone. If you also have any tips for anybody else, if you are getting used to the controls, feel free to leave them in the comments down below as well. And again, feel free to like the video and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. But no pressure as always. This is already a long enough outro. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Goodbye!